This is a land of endless dunes, wind, and silence. It's called Western Sahara. For nearly 50 years, it has been claimed by one nation and fought for by another. The United Nations calls it Africa's last colony, and its people still wait for a promised vote that never came. But the story doesn't begin with Morocco or the Polisario Front. It begins with Spanish soldiers, colonial maps, and a desert rich in resources. It is November 1881, and Europe is scrambling to divide Africa. At the Congress of Berlin, European leaders are carving up the continent. But there is disagreement over this territory here. An arid coastal strip south of Morocco. Britain, France, and Portugal all want it. But it is Spain which makes the first move. Madrid dispatched a naval squadron led by Rear Admiral Camara y Quezada to occupy the area. As their ships sailed into the Atlantic, Camara's radioed his men. "We're going to conquer and possess these regions." Weeks later, Spanish troops occupied the town of Rio de Oro, now part of Western Sahara. This was only the beginning. Over the next 70 years, Spain would rule this region known as the Spanish Sahara. But the colonial project was far from simple. The Sahara was barely populated, mostly inhabited by nomadic tribes who tended their goats and camels among the dunes. As such, Madrid found it difficult to administer. There were no paved roads, schools, or hospitals. Very few Spaniards lived there. Instead, Madrid largely left the Spanish Sahara alone, enjoying the benefits of their possession without really trying to govern it. They fished its rich waters. Especially prized were the baby eels known as elvers. These were shipped to Europe to be fattened up before being served as delicacies in expensive restaurants. The Sahara also proved useful during World War II. Spain remained neutral in the conflict, but it allowed German U-boats to dock in its colonial ports. However, the Spanish Sahara's real wealth lay beneath the sands. Beneath the desert surface, vast mineral riches, especially phosphate, attracted the attention of the colonial power. In fact, at the time, the Spanish Sahara contained the world's largest phosphate reserves. Madrid used these resources to fund the colonial administration. All of this changed in the mid-1960s. Over the previous decade, most of Africa had won independence from colonial rule. Only a handful of territories remained, and Western Sahara was one of them. The United Nations had been pushing Spain to decolonize the territory for years. On February 15, 1966, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution calling for the self-determination of the territory, but Madrid ignored these calls. Instead, it tried to buy time. The Spanish government was stalling, valuing its phosphate mines and rich fisheries too much to let go. Meanwhile, the nationalistic feelings among the local population were growing. Until now, Spain hadn't had to worry about the tribe's grievances, but that was changing. In 1969, the local Sahrawi nationalists founded the Polisario Front, or Those Who Struggle. Its goal was clear: full independence from colonial rule. By 1974, the wave of independence sweeping across Africa had reached its peak. The UN Security Council was urging Spain to decolonize Western Sahara once and for all. Once again, Madrid refused. But this time, the Spanish government was forced to consider a compromise. On November 14, 1975, Spain announced it would pull out of the territory. However, it planned to hold a referendum on the future of Western Sahara, but the results were never in doubt. Local leaders supported independence, while Morocco wanted to annex the territory. The question was, how would Spain decide? The answer came unexpectedly. On October 6, 1975, King Hassan II of Morocco sent hundreds of thousands of his citizens into Western Sahara. Known as the Green March, this civilian movement was aimed at pressuring Spain to hand the territory over to Morocco. The Spanish were completely caught off guard. They considered allowing the civilians in as a protest. But soon they realized that the marchers had no intention of leaving. The Moroccan king played his cards well. The Green March garnered widespread international support, especially in the Muslim world. Seeing the writing on the wall, the Spanish government hastily organized a referendum on Western Sahara, but it was flawed from the start. Only Spanish citizens living in the territory were allowed to vote. As we mentioned earlier, very few Spaniards actually lived there. So the referendum only represented the interests of the colonial administration, not those of the indigenous population. As expected, the vote went to Morocco. Less than 100,000 ballots were cast in favor of Morocco, 85,000 for independence and 40,000 for Mauritania. Spain recognized the results and in April 1976 signed the Madrid Accords with Morocco and Mauritania. The accords handed over control of Western Sahara without consulting the Sahrawi people. Spain pulled out of the territory, leaving behind an abandoned airport, schools, and barracks. Soon, Moroccan and Mauritanian soldiers moved in. The Sahrawi people had been betrayed. Those who didn't flee into the desert began to organize resistance, and so the war began. The Polisario Front, backed by Algeria, immediately took up arms. Guerrilla fighters clashed with Moroccan and Mauritanian troops. The Polisario declared the establishment of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. Its president, Mohammed Abdelaziz, declared, "We will fight until the last man, if necessary." But despite the fervor, the Sahrawis were facing a tough battle. Morocco and Mauritania controlled the main towns and cities, while the Polisario was based in the rugged desert. The guerrillas used their knowledge of the terrain to launch surprise attacks, then melt away into the sands. Mauritania quickly became disillusioned with the war. They did not want to fight a fellow African country. So in 1979, they pulled out, leaving Morocco in sole control. Soon, the tide of the war began to turn. Morocco deployed tanks, artillery, and fighter jets. With more manpower and firepower, the Moroccan army drove the Polisario further into the desert. By the end of the 1980s, the guerrillas were pushed to the brink. But instead of finishing off the Polisario, Morocco focused on securing the territory. To achieve this, they needed to stop the guerrillas' freedom of movement. Thus, a massive sand wall was constructed. Stretching over 2,700 kilometers, the wall is the longest active military barrier in the world. It runs along the entire length of the Moroccan-controlled north of the territory. The wall is manned by tens of thousands of Moroccan soldiers. It is ringed with minefields and monitored by radar. It even features its own rail system to transport military vehicles and personnel. To the east of the wall lies a vast, barren expanse, the free zone under Polisario control. The wall has proven highly effective. The Polisario can no longer operate freely. Their supply routes into the territory are cut off. Soldiers, weapons, and food can no longer be brought into the free zone. In 1991, the United Nations brokered a ceasefire between Morocco and the Polisario. Both sides agreed to stop fighting. The following year, a UN mission, MINURSO, was established to monitor the ceasefire. The ceasefire agreement also included a plan for a referendum on Western Sahara's future. But disputes over who could vote stalled the process indefinitely. The result was a stalemate. The war stopped, but the conflict froze in place. Since then, two issues have dominated the headlines. First, the Moroccan government's proposal for autonomy within Morocco, and second, the fate of the Western Sahara's natural resources. Meanwhile, the threat of renewed fighting has loomed over the territory. In 2020, fighting erupted again along the Berm. The Polisario declared the ceasefire over after accusing Morocco of violating it. Since then, skirmishes and drone strikes have been commonplace. So what is the current situation today? The United Nations has consistently called for a referendum to be held in Western Sahara. The territory's status remains frozen in limbo. And tens of thousands of Sahrawi refugees still live in camps in Tindouf, Algeria, waiting for the vote they were promised over 30 years ago. Morocco has treated the territory as its southern provinces, building infrastructure and heavily guarding the border. And the UN mission, MINURSO, still patrols the desert, one of the few peacekeeping missions with no human rights mandate. In recent years, the US, Canada, Brazil, and others have recognized Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara. But the African Union continues to back the Sahrawi right to self-determination. So that is why the world still calls it Africa's last colony. Thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us to produce more content like this. Thank you again for watching, and we will see you in the next episode.